Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a homeowner association sold my house I inherited from my mom even though I am not an HOA member. They destroyed my property and I ended up suing them. Here is what happened, let's dive right into the story. The title story starts like this. The relationship I have with my family is complicated and honestly could take up an entire story. For this, just know that before the events of this story I had not spoken to my mother in several years. Living in separate countries also made it so I didn't really have much contact with any of the family living in my native country. I went back there to visit and try to make things a little bit more normal again with my family. That was when I learned my mother had passed away 2 years prior and I did not even know until I got there. I was sad that I never got to say goodbye to her or mourn with the rest of my family down there. I was almost in a total state of shock that only grew when I found out she had left me her home and property. I offered it to my uncle and his family since they were close to her when she died and I felt they deserved it more than me. They told me though that she even said at the end she wanted me to have it, which made me start crying. I had not been to that house in so many years and she had left it to me despite us having issues in the past. I left and went to go see the property and entered the house for the first time in many years. The first weird thing was, though, the house looked very different, but I brushed that aside to me not being around. Then the keys did not work to the front door and that was the big sign that sent a bad feeling to my gut. I heard voices, so I knocked on the door and was greeted by a very scared couple. In their defense, they did think that I was trying to break in or something. I explained that I was the owner of the house and confused as to what they were doing there. They told me that they had bought the house from the owner 5 months ago and that just raised more questions than it did answers. I told them how it didn't make any sense because my mom died 2 years ago, so from that point I would have been the owner. And I obviously did not sell them anything. I got pointed in the direction of the neighbor who happened to also run the HOA. The couple said he was the one that sold them the house. I went next door and knocked until a man opened up looking already annoyed with me. But I didn't care and wanted to know why he had sold a house that did not belong to him. Man: Yes. Me: Did you sell the house next door? Man: I did. What is it, any of your business? Me: Well, that was my mother's house and when she died I inherited the property. You had no right to sell my house to somebody else. Man: You were not here, so I claimed it on behalf of the HOA. It was abandoned and you lost the rights to it. Now get off my property. Me: I'm not leaving or I'm finished with you. I know damn well that my uncle filed the paperwork and the house was transferred into my name. With the city knowing that I was not currently living there and my uncle coming twice a year to maintain it. Man: If you don't leave, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Me: You're the criminal here. I'll admit that I was highly emotional. And his aggressive attitude was not helping me at all. He actually had the nerve to call the police on me for trespassing and complaining about me being crazy when they arrived. I told them how he sold the house and it belonged to me and he was the one that should be getting in trouble. The police told me that if I had a land dispute I could file a report and sue him, but I had to leave his property for the time. You can be sure that I got a lawyer and I also found out from my uncle the changes to the house were not made by the family. They were made by the HOA guy because he considered it to be an improvement. When in reality he had destroyed very sentimental areas of the home and now those parts only remain in memory. I was even angrier when I found out that and told a lawyer that I wanted to make sure he paid deeply for what he had done. We filed a lawsuit for him stealing the land, illegally selling it, and property damages. In court he had his fancy HOA lawyer and was not worried at all. He claimed that since the land was abandoned he would doing the city and everybody else a favor by taking it over. Claiming that as part of the HOA the home needed to be maintained, so he took it over. That he deserved the profit because he put so much work and money into the renovations to be able to sell it. We argued that neither my mother nor I were ever part of the HOA, so he should not have gotten any kind of control. Even if it was abandoned, the government would have. Second, it was not abandoned and I had the paperwork to prove that, which was another strike against him. Finally, he had no right to destroy parts of the house even if he was going to use the term renovate for it. The third strike and he was out. I won the case easily, but there was a huge issue still regarding the property. It had been technically sold and the couple was still living inside of my house. I had to make some tough decisions that would make things work best for myself. I did not want to stay in this country permanently and wanted to go back home, so I figured making money from other people living in it would be fine. It got worked out that the property was back in my name, but I would rent it to the couple so they could stay, with the money they spent on the home already going to count as payments until it ran out. It was a very odd deal, but the contract was signed, so that worked out. Plus, as owner, no more adjustments could be randomly made. As for the HOA man, he got in some serious trouble for what he had done. He had to give me $450,000, which was a mixture from the profit he made off the sale and for damages done to my home with his illegal renovations. He was also sent to prison for fraud, since selling the house meant he had to go behind several laws to get it done. The HOA as a whole also got disbanded for conducting themselves in improper and illegal actions, meaning they could not be trusted to stay after the stunt that he pulled with my house. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even leave a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is another revenge story. So much like a lot of people during college, I had a part-time job at a major coffee chain. It was great because it provided me with extra cash and an unlimited supply of caffeine. Like most chains, the driving factor to draw people in is excellent customer service, and that no matter how ridiculous the customer is, he or she is always right. On this specific day, right before our major rush, the only customers we had was a husband, wife with their 4 kids, ages 2 to 5. The wife tells the husband her order while they go through the line and walks out. The 4 girls eventually follow her out after looking through pastry cases while husband makes the order. No big deal at this point, pretty normal interaction, but I notice one of the girls has taken a bottle of water from the pastry case, so I mention it to the husband. Husband was really cool about it, and even though I told him it was no big deal, he still paid the $1.95 for the bottle. 15 to 20 minutes go by and our rush has started. We have 15 plus people now in line, and the husband marches back in straight up to me, clearly upset as he walks past the line. Husband says to me, "Hey, why did you tell me my daughter stole a bottle of water?" Me, "My apologies, sir. It must have only looked like your daughter took a bottle of water. Not to worry, let me get you back the $1.95. Husband, "What's with the attitude? Are you calling me a liar?" Guy is making a pretty big scene and everyone is looking. Me, "Not at all, sir. I just meant I must have been incorrect with watching your daughter walk out the door holding a bottle of water." I am at this point holding the money out to the husband and he is refusing to take it. Husband, "It's not about the $1.95, it's about the principle. If you're calling me a liar, we can take this outside." Me, "No, sir. Please, sir, you are holding up our line now and need to take your refund and leave." Husband starts saying and talking a bunch of crap, but is slowly going. Finally, after taking the money, he says one last condescending remark to many that finally rubs me the wrong way. Me, "Thank you, sir, have a nice day, enjoy your bottle of water." This then leads to the husband throwing his $1.95 back at me, completely missing me and hitting one of my coworkers instead. Husband starts demanding to speak to my manager immediately. Luckily at that moment the manager was out, so we diffused the situation and told the husband to come back in an hour to speak to the manager. Now after all this build up, here comes my petty revenge. After the husband left, my manager got back about 30 minutes later. I explained everything that happened while he was gone. My manager looked perplexed about the story because when he walked in the store after he got back there was an unopened bottle of water shoved between a bunch of coffee mugs on a stand right in front of the entrance. My manager decided to pull the store security tapes and lo and behold, the dude put it on the shelf seconds before confronting me at the register. The guy then comes back just a bit later with a buddy absolutely steaming. I happened to meet him at the front door when he walked in and he demanded to see my manager and telling me that he's about to get me fired. And well, my manager comes out to talk to the guy and I slowly stalked off just in earshot, pretending to clean tables to get a front row seat of the show. Husband takes no time at all and yells, "I demand an apology, my money back and that guy fired," and points at me. My manager calmly turns around, grabs the bottle of water that is still sitting on the shelf behind him, hands it to the guy and says, "No, I don't think so. After looking at the security footage, we watched you bring the bottle back and place it back on the shelf." The sheer look of horror on the husband's face was priceless. I'd never seen a person so stunned in my life. It was great. The guy started backtracking and sputtering out non-nonsensical apologies. The crowning moment was still to come. My manager then pulls out the $1.95 that was thrown back at me earlier in an envelope with $1.95 wrote on the outside, hands it to the guys and says, "Clearly you need this more than we do. Now, after you apologize to my barista, you can get out of my store." The husband was so embarrassed he refused to take the money back. I have now drifted close enough by that the guy reaches his hand out to me, shakes my hand, apologizes, and then walks out the store utterly annihilated. This was one of my most satisfying days working there because I finally got a petty revenge on one of those piece of crap entitled customers. And the next one is titled Malicious Compliance Perfectly. So I met a random guy through a friend at a bar in the city. Let's call the guy I met Mark for the purpose of this post. My friend had introduced me to Mark because for a few years leading up to that introduction, I shared an idea I had for a business with anyone who would listen. I was told Mark wanted to start his own business, had worked in the industry and knew a lot about the subject matter required and thought my idea was good. Mark and I met up for lunch and we hit it off. He said he would start the business as the CEO and agreed to me taking a part-time operational role. I agreed to help solely in a part-time operational role because I couldn't afford to quit my day job. I put in 15% of the cash for 5% ownership since Mark was gonna put in founder hours, 80 plus hours a week, and agreed to put up 85% of the cash, which was more money than I could afford to risk on a new venture. Well, I worked part-time, I did what I said I would do, I even tried to be of assistance on things I had no experience with. I connected Mark with a fella I had done business with before, we will call him Paul. Paul and I got into a dispute ourselves, more on this later. Anyway, let's fast forward a few months and I got into a dispute with Mark over stationery. Yes, stationery not being to his liking caused him to flip out. This was despite him picking the stationery out. Next up, the contract I got from Mark was not what we agreed. The legal work required a few months to get done, and I had expected delays, but when I finally got it, the paperwork did not represent what I had agreed to own. Not only that, but my investment was not being acknowledged under the terms we had committed to when I put the money in. Now, as I said, I was not able to risk much and I only invested what I could afford to lose, so this was not a huge sum of money. I did not want to make a big deal about it since the amount was small, and he began promising a new contract when the business could pay for the lawyers to make changes. I signed nothing, and then it worsened. Mark and I start to fight anytime we're in a room together. As I think back, it's almost comical how angry he would get in my presence. I have other things to do with my time than squabble over stuff like stationery, so I worked on my areas of the business and I hoped things would grow. I stopped in whenever I could and would help out regularly as needed with as little Mark interaction as possible. Paul would intervene sometimes when Mark would get particularly difficult to be around. Anyway, fast forward about 2 years and Mark cannot help but tell everyone who will listen that the business is going well. I have no idea how well things are going because Mark is not giving me any updates. And well, I get a call around Christmas from Mark. He wishes me a happy holiday and then drops the bomb on me that he wants to terminate my involvement and refund my investment. I decline the investment refund and say I'm happy to no longer work with him. In my head, I think it's kind of hilarious that he thinks this will just end that easily, but I say nothing to that accord to him. Mark and I hang up with him, aggravated about my refusal to take the refund on my investment. Mark then sends me an email that I had resigned. This had no basis in fact, but certainly was creative about what we had just discussed. I correct him immediately in a reply stating that he wanted to no longer work together and that I can see that being the case but want to discuss my investment. A few days later, Mark demands that I come pick up a check for a reimbursement of my investment. I do not come and get it. Next thing you know, the company attorney huffs and puffs and tries to scare me with some strongly worded letter. This is the same idiot attorney who screwed up my contract to work on the business and my investment agreement. Let's call this attorney Mr. Cohn for the sake of this story. I sent an email response to Mr. Cohn that he screwed up, the company seems to be doing well, that I hear rumors about how well and that I want to be on this for the foreseeable future and I'll not take one-to-one cash out for what I put in. The attorney then emails me back stating in writing that Mark never accepted my electronic transfer into the company account. Instead, Mark has another company he accepted the money into, a company I've never heard of. A company that is different than the name of the recipient on my electronic transfer, a company that would be committing wire fraud to accept the money I sent. On that note, I did some sleuthing online. I found out Mark had been forming one company every month or two. Then there were media reports and documents he let slip in shared drives he forgot I had access to from when we agreed to work together. Mark was too cheap and stupid to pay for tech help, so he was using my shared folders I had created, and I certainly was not obligated to turn off the shares if he wanted to work out of them. Those documents showed me Mark had recently raised the money in the company I sent the payment to at 200 times the valuation I had bought into it, and Mark did not disclose the investment to the new investors. Mark had, however, put me on documents showing my ownership to previous investors. Not on documents I'd ever seen before, but documents he had been sending around. So when I share my suspicions that Mark is committing wire fraud with Mr. Cohn, I'm told I'm the one breaking the law by knowing anything about the investment documents the company has used. Mr. Cohn tells me that by not picking up my check, I will not be entitled to any money and to contact law enforcement if I think something illegal has happened. He cautions through that I'll be the one in trouble. Cue my malicious compliance. I let the different respective members of the Securities and Exchange Commission along with law enforcement know what happened to me. I provided them all of the documents I had from the matter. It took about 5 years for the investigation to conclude, for charges to be brought, and for a trial to conclude, and for Mark to go to jail. They say government is slow, but they are not kidding with just how slow. Maybe it was slow because Mark was running a large, tens of millions of dollars large fraud. Anyway, Mark will be serving time for about 30 felony charges they found uncovering the details of his Ponzi scheme. He will be away for a long time. I never did anything wrong. With the information I was able to provide, Mr. Cohn ended up getting disbarred. There were other things Mr. Cohn did outside of what is shared in this post that I cannot share, or it could help to identify me to the folks involved. The investigators credited me with bringing the fraud to their attention. I lost my money in this ordeal but gained an education, and I got to help bring down a crook. The sheer stupidity of Mark is that he didn't even follow the business plan I had, he just used it as a story to convince investors to give him money. It's a business model that works very well. It took a few more years, but I am now in a position to be pursuing this business full-time with people of high integrity who all work together to ensure each other's success. We expect to have an extremely profitable year in 2023 after proving the business model worked in 2020. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I'm so happy about the turnout of the story for OP. This ending felt really good. It's good to see the good guys win and the bad guys lose, not gonna lie. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. HOA neighbor trespassed on my property and cut down 15 of my banana trees and poured salt over them while I was absent. When I moved to my house, I purchased a home because it had almost 20 banana trees. And yep, I said 20 frickin' banana trees. I like bananas and I have a killer banana bread recipe, so no judgment, y'all. Anyway, I was a little skeptical at first because the home was in a neighborhood governed by a homeowners association. However, a good girlfriend of mine lived there as well, and she said that they were a decent group, not one of those meddling ones. So, surprisingly enough, this story is not about how terrible my HOA was, but really the pain in the rear that was my neighbor. We are gonna call her Cindy. Cindy was one of those women who probably thought her crap did not stink. She had 2 little yappy dogs that would terrorize the ducks and bark at all hours of the morning. Plus, she would scream at anyone who walked on or near her grass while they were enjoying the neighborhood pond. Her house backed up to a large pond that everyone who lived there was entitled to visiting. My house also had access to the pond from my yard, but she certainly had the better view and angle. One day though, I noticed that she was having some of her trees removed from her backyard. I don't frankly give one damn, it is her yard, but I just had a suspicion that they would cut down some of mine as well. Some of the trees that they were cutting down in her yard were fruit-bearing ones like the banana trees I had, but she even had a really nice orange tree removed. I honestly will never understand that woman. I remember one of the few times that I spoke to her cordially, she was saying that she felt like the fruit were more of a burden than a benefit. I'm like, you're crazy, just take the spare that you have to the market in town and give them away. Or you could give me your spare oranges and bananas because I am shameless. So, like I said, I see the guy chopping down trees all willy-nilly and decide to go establish my boundaries before he does any damage. I tell him, "This is my property line, don't touch my trees." He said okay, and I assumed that was the end of the necessary discussion. I was wrong. The following day I had to leave for about 3 days to go to a conference in a nearby city. It was terribly boring, and I was particularly pissed when I saw what had happened to my property while I was away. When I returned home, I found my precious banana trees gone, chopped down like some cheap lumber. The a-holes even poured salt on the roots and sprouts so that they would be dead for sure. No chance for regrowth now. I was absolutely in shock. That quickly shifted to grief though, and then to rage as I was willing to go over to her house and pound her dumb face in. I did the responsible thing and not what the college me would have done, and calmed down before going to pay her a visit. When she answered the door, she could tell that I was angry, but I was restrained like I said. With as much respect as I could muster, I asked her why she had my trees cut down, and she said that she did not believe that they were on my property. What? Did not believe? The nerve of this woman, I tell you. When I told her that it did not matter what she believed and that I wanted her to pay to replace the trees, she simply laughed and said, "Haha, nope." When she shut the door in my face, I was about ready to lose it, but again, I kept my composure. Barely. I went on to hire an arborist and a property surveyor. Both of these lovely people confirmed exactly what I needed to know. That is when I also contacted the HOA because she removed some of their trees from their public neighborhood property as well. Somehow they had not noticed yet though. The HOA was actually pretty pissed too and backed me up. She was ordered to pay over $30,000 in fines for the banana trees, only I did not think that this was enough. Damn, this lady must be loaded because she did not seem bothered by this and she continued to live her life the way she always had, which is as an a-hole. Her dogs still went outside and barked their heads off, and she continued to stand on her porch and watch people when they tried to enjoy the public access to the pond for fishing or whatever. That is when I realized something. Cindy hates lizards or anything like that. It does not matter if it's an iguana, a snake or something else. She does not want it on her property. That is where people like me, who used to catch these lizards all the time, drive people like Mrs. Cindy absolutely nuts. On top of my lizard revenge, I figured I might as well do some planting in the middle of the night too. My double revenge plan began, and I built some homemade traps to catch some really big lizards. I was going for tegus, which were the easiest to find and catch in our area with a simple PVC trap. Plus, they were not really going to hurt anyone. I managed to catch 3 of them in a day and a half, and during this time frame I was also going out in the middle of the night and burying some annoying plants like a Bradford pear tree sapling and some bamboo along with the banana trees that she so loved. I knew she may remove them before anything came from it, but it was still amusing to me. And by the way, Ripe starts by saying burying some annoying plants. OP means that she planted them at night. Either way, the ultimate revenge would be the lizards. She had a screened-in back porch because mosquitoes that she kept in super nice shape. She was always out there sipping her drinks and listening to her weird unheard of jazz music. Not that I'm a hater of jazz, but Google could not even figure out who it was. So what better place than to plant the tegus than her back porch? It was early morning, and the 4, there was a bonus in the last one I caught, tegu lizards were ready to go. I creeped up to her house, finagled the door open, and let the guys out one by one. The biggest lizard ended up trying to climb up something and knocked over one of her potted plants, and this led to her coming out a moment later, her dogs barking in tow. I was watching from my back porch, sitting and sipping my morning coffee the same way she likes to sit and judge people, when I heard the hilarious scrambling and frantic screams from her and her Yorkies as she got ran up on by 4 good-sized tegu lizards. Even the dogs were yipping and trying to get back into the house. She ended up tripping in her doorway as one started trying to crawl up her leg. I was laughing my ass off and found myself giddy at the trouble it caused. She spent all day screaming on the phone at animal control, trying to get them to come out and wrangle the lizards. They are pretty busy this time of year with other reptile and animal calls that she was probably put on a list. She did not like that, and Cindy ended up making her son come out to get the lizards, only he did not know what he was doing either, scrambling around her porch as she shrieked at him to "Get it, get it!" Damn, it was so funny. He utterly failed his mother and they got into an argument before he gave up and left. And by that evening, animal control showed up and took care of the problem, which consisted of the guy throwing a towel over the angriest one and the other 3 went peacefully into the cages. Really, no big deal. The dude was even telling Cindy to go back inside and let him do his job because she could not help but micromanage him the way she was doing her own poor son. It did not take long for the saplings I snuck into her property to start growing as well. If you've ever heard of what bamboo does, you know that it was only a matter of time before it had spawned all over the place. She was livid. She knew that I had done it too, and when she told me that I had to remove it from her property, I simply laughed in her face and said, "Nope," the same way she did me at the beginning. She absolutely deserved it. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.